became apparent to me after class that there were several questions that I failed to address as we went through this problem that used incremental analysis to determine what happens if we shut down an unprofitable business segment. So I wanted to record this video to clarify any confusion that may exist and hopefully answer any questions you might have. So the first part of this problem said, what happens if we've got an organization here that owns two convenience stores, one in Minneapolis and one in St. Paul, and here's the profit from each convenience store. So currently, when you add both together, the company has a $90,000 profit. So the way I probably should have set this up in class is saying, look, if we keep both stores open, we can expect to have a corporate profit or total profit of $90,000, and that came from adding those two together. But what happens if I simply close this St. Paul store? If I close the St. Paul store, what happens, you would think you wouldn't sell anything and you'd have no expenses, right? But you can't simply get rid of this. This is kind of the kicker here, this corporate overhead. Corporate overhead refers to items that are expenses that are incurred at the corporate level, like the salary of a CEO or the cost to file the tax return for the entire corporation. So there are costs that the organization incurs, but has a hard time allocating it or tracing it directly to one of these convenience stores. That doesn't simply go away. You don't get rid of the CEO if you close down this one store. So what happens is if we leave this Minneapolis store and we shut down the St. Paul store, and if we had zero corporate overhead, nothing, no CEOs or anything, we would expect a $240,000 operating income. Now we know that's not realistic because there are those overhead costs, and they told us it was $180,000 prior to shutting down the St. Paul store. What's not so clear is that when we shut down this store, it doesn't simply go to zero. What happens is, and this is the key right here, the total corporate overhead reduces from what was $180. It goes down by $88,000. So maybe they were able to, get rid of a general manager that oversaw both stores because there's only one store. So they had savings in salary of that much, something like that. So what happens is my corporate overhead costs reduce to 92. So my one store that remains would have a corporate overhead allocation of 92,000. So what happens is my profit for the corporation, if I shut down the St. Paul store, is I have a $148,000 operating income. So it seems logical from a financial perspective they should shut down the store and they would save effectively $58,000. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. Second part of the question says, okay, let's not shut that store down. What happens if I create a new store that's identical to the St. Paul store? So in other words, we're just going to take and copy everything over and say, okay, now we've got a third store. Corporation now operates at 3 locations. That would mean that the profit would be an aggregate of all 3 locations added together, which would be $40,000 if we simply duplicated the corporate overhead. But again, we know that's not what happens. We don't add another CEO or add another corporate jet or those sorts of things if we simply open one new store. So to correctly compute what happens, we need to know, does it go up at all? Should it be zero? What happens here? And the problem reveals to us that the overhead at a corporate level increases by 8,000, not 80,000, which would happen if we duplicated. It doesn't simply stay at zero, it increases by 8,000. So what happens is this new store produces a operating income of 22 grand. When you add up all 3 of the locations together, you have $112,000 of profit, which is the correct answer in identifying what happens at a corporate level to the operating income if we simply duplicate this store while only increasing my corporate overhead by $8,000. So I hope this helped clarify any questions you might have remaining to this example we walked through in class.